Oh, working with clients. Well, again, as I said, outside of the fairly unusual stories that I can share, other experiences that I have is really a matter of trying to build trust and relationships with them. The usual thing that a client, when you work with a client to a certain extent, especially when you're introduced to a client for the first time, don't expect that the client will talk about the project from the very beginning. This hardly happens. The first thing that usually occurs is that the client really just wants to get to know who you are. So first couple of meetings is really a matter of sharing what kind of a person you are, as opposed to what are your abilities. Yeah, to a certain extent, a client knows that you being an architect, that you have the skills, that you have the abilities to come up with a desired solution for their projects. By presenting them your portfolio, they know your architectural language that you follow. So it is a given thing that it's sort of like going to a barber or a dentist. And when you go to a dentist, any kind of dentist will know how to do your filling. So that is obvious, but it's really building a trust and a network of trust with your client by getting to know you as a person. I've experienced wherein, clients would interview you regarding who you are, where you come from, what are your personal experiences. They'll start to drop a lot of their own personal experiences. And if you fail to sort of like pick up on these things based on your limited knowledge, then you're in deep trouble. You may not eventually end up getting the project because they feel that you're not the right person because you don't know their lifestyles. The first thing, and one of the things that I always tell my students is that doing a project for a client is actually providing them with a service to address their lifestyle needs. We don't design for ourselves. That's the last thing one does. We design for the clients. The clients come from a certain kind of class level. We need to know that class level. We need to know what they do. It is not safe to say that, and it's not enough for you to say that because this is what I know and this is my comfort zone, that this comfort zone is something that the clients will accept. No. Remember, clients come from a gamut of backgrounds, and we need to know what these backgrounds are. Sometimes a client will bring you or will invite you to certain things that you may not necessarily be familiar with, such as, say, a polo game. And you need to, one way or the other, pretend to know what polo is. They may eventually invite you to an opera or a ballet, and you just cannot simply go to the CCP or any theater for that matter and fall asleep simply because this is not your thing. You cannot just simply go to dinner when you're invited, that not knowing the utensils that are put on display and eating in the way that you normally eat. Of course not, because these little things are observed by the clients. Remember, a client that is fairly well off is a client that will always ask you to do projects for them. These are the people that we want to court because these are the people that have the money to promote and to explore all of their architectural requirements and needs. And we have to, one way or the other, again, understand where they're coming from, understand the language that they are using. I had a client before who wanted to do a boutique, basically a store, and she told me that she wanted it to be of a French provincial style. And she dropped a particular term in French that if ordinary people may not know what it is, then you're stuck because that is the clue to what kind of theme the design is. She said to me, "Architect, I want my walls designed in Toit de Jouy." And good for me because I taught interior design as well. I know what the hell Toit de Jouy is. And as such, was able to present her a catalog of prints in the Toit de Jouy look. But for some, they'll probably say this ridiculous question of, could you tell me what it is? But how can they explain that? They know the term, they know how it looks like, but they'll probably have a difficulty in explaining it to you. So if you don't know what it is, more so it will be difficult for you to translate a solution that a client desires. There is again as well a need for us to explore and learn further outside of what is taught in school. To learn further as well the various disciplines that is related to architecture. I have a colleague in work who is a landscape architect, and I have to understand as well the language that they use for landscaping. Because when we do clients as well, their gardens, the extension of their houses, the outside of their houses, I need to understand as well the fundamental natures of how plants thrive and how plants are used and how plants are designed, how we can design with plants. All of these require knowledge from your colleagues and understanding from where your clients are coming from. Your clients, again, is not you. It's good if you're able to apply a lot of these things on your own personal domicile. But for some, unfortunately, when they go home, it's just a matter for resting. Or if not, because they're living with relatives, they cannot. But if you're able to at least use your own house as your experiment for both architecture, interior, and landscaping, then to a certain extent, you will then be able to amass yourselves a certain kind of leverage so that when a client asks you a lot of things regarding the various disciplines that architecture entails, you then have the answer. Well, we have different types of clients. Again, as I said, your best client is what I would call a patron. A patron is someone who is very rich and who surrounds himself with the people who can inspire him. Not only for you to be able to build and design all of the projects they need, but for you to inspire them with their design ambitions and design vision. It's very difficult to look for a patron because number one, they are very few and far in between. But once you have a patron, you are made for life because you will be designing all of the things that they need. All of the things for their business, all of their things for their families. And that will keep you preoccupied. Now, next to your patron would be, of course, your client. And your client can come in various forms. They can be fairly rich, old rich, new rich, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, your OFW, and of course, your relatives and friends who usually you design for free because they happen to be relatives. So in all aspects, these are the kind of economic status that your clients are. Now, of course, there are classifications to all of these people. They may be men, they may be women, they may be elderly, they may be yuppies, they may be newlyweds. So it's again, a diverse group of people that you have to one way or the other profile. How do you discuss things with an older couple? To a certain extent, you have to address certain ergonometrics and anthropometric needs. They may not necessarily be as active as they should be when they're young. So in short, you need to address certain conditions that relate to age, such as the height of steps or the height of cabinets. Or the proximity of spaces brought about by certain human bodily functions that normally deteriorate with age. You may be dealing with a newlywed couple. And with newlywed couples, of course, it's a little bit more sensitive because you then tend to ask the question of how many children they plan to have in the future. But then these are things that they cannot normally answer unless you ask them how often they do it in a night. So the question goes now into the intimacy of activities because at the end, you need to know basically how to design for them. The worst kind of client that I've ever experienced, of course, are those that have the money now, don't have the money later. And that results now in either delays in payment or delays in construction. But sometimes, of course, this becomes an exciting experimentation as well, because with limited budget, you then end up trying to come up with solutions that is likable, that is presentable, that is livable, but at the same time, that is within the budget of the clients. Definitely along the way, you would have clients who would be kind of pretentious in the sense that they will always say that they have the funding, that sky's the limit, and then at the end of the day, your design will be value engineered, and a good percentage of your solution will be removed simply because of cost. And that can end up being frustrating, because from the very beginning, they could have told you that this is my budget, and as such, designed based on that reality. But I do understand that clients, of course, would want to sort of like be fed with that fantasy that if they have the budget, this is how their dream structure or their dream building or dream house or office can look like. But the reality is everything usually is budget engineered, value engineered, resulting now in the downgrading of solutions, which can end up fairly being frustrating, because the vision that you may have had is sacrificed for economy. Now, if you are a very good and astute designer, you could have already from the very beginning realized the fact that a design will be value engineered. When I say value engineered, we are talking about making the design feasible to the budget that is provided. The budget that is provided sometimes changes along the way. Sometimes there is an increase, but most oftentimes there is a decrease. And as such, there is a need to reduce the cost of construction by reducing certain design elements which may be deemed as unnecessary. It is sort of like stripping someone naked. If you are already built with a very beautiful body, no amount of clothes will make you still further beautiful. But if you have a naked body that is not, shall we say, presentable, then of course the only way for you to make this person beautiful is by wrapping them with very interesting clothing. But if you're value engineered and that interesting piece of clothing is removed, what else is there to see? That becomes a problem. So the problem of clients not telling you from the very beginning what their budget is an issue that can end up being very frustrating.